As a woodworker, I'm a little embarrassed to say I've been using these aluminum outdoor chairs on my back deck, along with the cedar furniture that I built that looks amazing. So today I'm gonna make a couple modern outdoor chairs to complete that set. I'm gonna use this cedar and I'm gonna show you how to save a little bit of money using larger timbers also. I'm Brad from Fix This Build That. Let's build something awesome. Right now, lumber prices are really high, and when I looked for cedar, the 2x4 8-footers were all the way up to like $35, and the cheapest I found was about $25. But what I could find are these 4x4 timbers, and these guys were only $40. So I can take these and cut them in half and get the 2x4s for only $20, which is cheaper than I could find them anywhere else. The 4x4 is about 3 3/4 of an inch thick, so we can cut it in 2 passes on the table saw. I'll set the blade to just under 2 inches, run it through, and then flip it over on the other side. Now, I did use the joiner and the planer to clean things up, but you could really do the whole thing on the table saw if you just take your time and make those passes, and you might have to just clean things up with a sander. The grain on these are really nice, and that's a nice advantage of using 4x4 timber is that the grain is typically a lot better and less knots than in the 2x4s. I can start going through the lumber and picking out the nicest pieces for the arms, which will really be the show pieces of the chairs. So I'll probably pick one of these that's nice and clear versus a guy like this that has a little sapwood down the middle. But you can make it however you want it. But now I can cut these to the length so we can start assembling the sides. Man, this smells good. I've got all the parts cut now, and I got a little mock-up of how this is gonna look. But a big problem with 2x4 furniture is that it's all really boxy, and the stuff that I built before, it looks like I designed it in Minecraft or something. So how do you give some style to 2x4 furniture? And I went with a 15-degree bevel on this front armrest. So as we fit it in here, it's gonna give it a nice little modern feel to it and get rid of some of that boxiness, and plus it'll be a little bit more comfortable as you have your arm resting here on the front. I'll be using some through dowel joinery on the top, which I think will look really nice, and some pocket hole joinery on the bottom because it will be concealed. But before I jump into that, I do want to address some of these really nasty knots and fill those with epoxy so that they can dry overnight, and then I can be ready for assembly in the morning. This is probably not necessary, but it'll just make sure that nothing falls apart over time, and you really don't want your furniture falling apart, so go ahead and shore it up. All right, I've got these all cleaned up, and now I can do that pocket hole joinery here on the bottom. I'm gonna use my Craig 720 Pro for that. You can pick up the 720 Pro at Woodcraft, who has been a long-term sponsor of the channel, and they basically have everything that you can need or want for woodworking projects. And they have the tools, the supplies, the finishes, and the hardware. Now, they have 70+ stores here in the US, so check and see if you have one local to you. But if you don't, you can go to woodcraft.com, and I'll have links below in the description to all these items where you can pick them up. All right, now we can get into assembly, and again, this is how we're gonna look here. And I'm gonna be clamping these up just to make sure they stay in place while I screw them together. And so when you start working with angles, it's nice to have some little offcuts. So I saved a few little offcuts of the 15 degrees, so I can put this over here on the edge so that I have a nice flat surface, because if you don't do that, then the clamp will slide up as you try to put pressure on it. So little tip for you as you do it. I'm gonna put a little outdoor glue on the ends here. Oh, is this all clogged up? Maybe I won't. Apparently it's been a minute since I used this. Oh, there we go. I marked a few spots on the back and the front, and the blue tape is basically just to help for tear out, because cedar will tear out very easily when you're drilling it from the top. I've got this all clamped up and ready to drill the dowels from the top, and I've got a piece of blue tape to know when to stop so that the dowel will be exactly where I want it to be, which is halfway in between the bottom and the top pieces. Let's get to drilling. All right, now we can put it all together. All right, that went pretty smoothly. I've got it in the clamps. It's gonna dry up and then we can plug those holes later, but I've got 3 more sides to make, so I gotta do that. If you wanna get all the measurements and build your own, I do have plans available. There's a link down below in the description. After a little bit of time in the clamps, we're all ready to go, and now I've got these dowel holes here that are exposed. So we need to fill those, and I'm going to use a plug cutter for that. I'm gonna go over to the drill press to do it. You could also do them with a hand drill. Drill press is way easier. So to make the plugs, I'm gonna use this plug cutter right here. I'm gonna chuck it up in the drill press, and these guys are really fun to use. I gotta show you guys something that I found is really interesting while I was cutting those dowels, and it has to do with which way that you cut them and the orientation of the wood. So my first idea was to do what I did over here on this side, which was to cut down on the face of the wood. But as I pulled those off the plug cutter, I could tell that these looked really nasty. You can see they're all bumpy, and that's because the grain runs in this direction, and we're cutting across that. So you can see all this little tear out here, and that won't be a nice filled hole. So I grabbed some other pieces, and I started drilling on the end grain. They are much more smooth, and they're with the grain, so this is a very solid piece, and there's no tear out on the sides here at all. So if you look at these side by side, you can see the difference. And obviously, this one that is going through the end grain is going to be way stronger and is going to hold together way better when we're putting it in versus this one here that we drilled down on the face grain. That will mean that once I put finish on them, it's going to be contrasting instead of blending in, but that's okay. Again, design feature. Now I can just take the dowels, put a little bit of glue on it, and then tap it in. And then of course, make sure you line up the grain lines with the grain on the wood. We'll just let that dry and then cut it flush and sand it, and it'll be good. And when you're flush cutting plugs, a playing card is gonna help save your wood. All right, so all you have to do is put that right there on the plug, and then that is going to protect the wood as you make that saw. And now the saw teeth don't go into the wood at all. So the chair sides are looking good, and now we can move on to the seat base, which is gonna be just a simple rectangle. I'm gonna be doing add these 2x4s, joining them together with pocket screws, and then putting some supports on the sides to hold the slats, which will support the cushions. All right, I haven't attached the slats just yet because I want to finish everything first before I screw it down, because it'll be way easier instead of trying to work through the nooks in the cracks. Now we can start working on the back of the chair, and I'm going to cut the pieces and cut a nice angle on them so they'll have a 15-degree splay on it, and then we'll talk about joinery for attaching the slats. All right, here are the uprights, and it's got a nice little 15-degree angle here, so I think that'll be comfy. Now I've got some more slats. These are just like the ones for the bottom here, but instead of having these on top, I want them to be flush with the back. So I'm actually going to recess these in and cut some dados out on the table saw. So I'll lay out 3 positions here for these slats, and then we'll gang them all together and cut them all at once on the saw. All right, the notches are looking great, but one more thing I want to add here is just a little design, and it's a little thick up here at the top. So what I did on the last couch, I'll do it here as well, is put a nice taper down here. So I'm gonna lay it out with the line, and then we'll go to the table saw and use the tapering jig. So now I can take my tapering jig, and I do have a video on how to make this if you want to check it out. And then just use the line to line it up on the edge, and then lock this into place. And then I can get consistent tapers, cut the first one, take it off, put the next one in there, and do all 4 of them right in a row. Right now we can attach the backs to the base, and they've got this nice angle on here. Love the taper. But instead of just attaching it with a screw in the front like I did last time, I'm gonna go more through the meat of the upright. But first, I need to counterbore a hole through here so that the screw can go in deep enough into the wood below it. I'll do that with my Forstner bit here, but you could also do that with a spade bit or just a large drill bit. Now we'll just attach it with a healthy bit of glue and drive those screws through there. Now that'll be a nice solid connection. Then once we sandwich this in between the arms and connect this into the arms, it's gonna be a really solid connection. So I'll just do the rest of these and we can move on to final finish. And the thing about woodworking is you gotta really think about a lot of different angles, literally and figuratively. As I was putting in the screw, I realized that one single screw is not enough to keep something from rotating. And the first 3 went great, but on the final upright, it was kind of moving around and it wasn't really anchored properly. So, you know, mistakes were made, but you're gonna run into that. And the thing is finding solutions. So all I did was grab my drill bit here, this is actually from my pocket hole jig, and was able to just drill in just a little recess and tap in another screw. So when you make the mistake, just figure out how you can easily fix that. In this one, it was a simple fix. So I just went ahead and tagged in the screw on each of the uprights. Now everything's gonna be super solid, and as I put the legs in, I won't have any concerns about anything rotating, and we'll be good. So, mistakes were made, solutions were found. It's always easier to do sanding and finish work before you assemble, so I'm gonna go ahead and round over all the edges on everything and get everything sanded up before I start assembling and doing the finish work. Now we're going to attach the sides to the seat base, but I've moved that apart, and I'm going to use these little straight edges. I'll put the seat height right around 16.5 inches for the top of that cushion, so you might need to adjust yours accordingly. But I can clamp that in place on both sides and then set the chair down and start attaching it. With any luck, I will not completely topple this over. So I can see an issue. This side here is just splayed out just a little bit. So I'm gonna go ahead and connect the slats on the top first, and that will make sure that everything is parallel and the same size from the top to the bottom, and it won't get in the way of attaching the sides. All right, the back is ready, but I am gonna put a little bit of glue on there because, you know, screws are great, but glue is also awesome. And I don't want it to get everywhere, so I'm just gonna go just a bit. Just a little something, something. Just a scotch. Maybe a little pinch. Little sweet. All right, coming down. Oh boy. Objects in video may be harder to clamp than they appear. Now for the front legs here, I'm gonna go to a number 10 3-inch screw and just countersink a couple underneath there, and that should be perfect to hold it in place, plus the glue will be great. We're going over the top.
Let's go! Let's go!
All right. All right, to flip the chair around, and the last thing we're gonna do on the assembly is put another screw through the back. It's kind of the same idea as before, because right now the screws are kind of all in one plane on this arm, so I wanna have one higher up as well. So I'm gonna tag one through right here on the upright. I'll sink the screw in there and put a little cedar plug in there and just sand it flush. Now for finish on my outdoor chairs, and especially cedar, I like to do a 3-step process. I'll go with the Total Boat wood sealer, then I will do a coat of gloss, maybe 2 coats, and then finish off with a coat of satin. And that'll be great for outdoor use, and it's gonna hold up really well. Plus it's undercover, so it should last for several years before it needs more. Build plans are available for the chairs. You can check the link down below in the description. If you want to see the other outdoor furniture builds, you can check the playlist right up there. A big thank you to all those folks that have been joining the FTBT Builders Club. And until next time, guys, get out there and build something awesome.